In 2004, Air France and KLM Royal Dutch Airlines attempted something the continent had never seen. Two flag carriers, symbols of national pride, separated by centuries of colonial rivalry, attempted to combine under a single holding company. Analysts called it a marriage of desperation because neither carrier could survive alone against the rising low-cost tide sweeping across Europe. The French government retained a golden share. The Dutch demanded operational autonomy. Every stakeholder assumed the structure would collapse within a decade. For 20 years since, European aviation has accepted a painful truth. Airlines are national institutions first and businesses second. Sovereignty always wins. Yet by January 2025, three holding companies, IAG, Lufthansa Group, and Air France-KLM, had accumulated over a dozen of distinct airline brands between them, controlling more than 40% of European long-haul capacity. In the past few years alone, Lufthansa Group finalized a 41% stake in ITA Airways. Air France-KLM acquired 19.9% of SAS Scandinavian Airlines, and IAG was still aiming to secure the full acquisition of Air Europa before dropping those plans in August 2024. But here's what makes no sense. In April 2026, Europe's four largest airline groups had a market share of 25% of the departing intra-European capacity. In the United States, the top four's market share is 79.1% of the domestic departing weekly capacity. Europe remains fragmented. These three groups can't dictate prices the way American carriers do. They can't fully merge their operations across borders. IAG tried to buy Air Europa and walked away after the European Commission demanded what the group had deemed as unacceptable concessions. Yet every independent airline in Europe is either already absorbed, under negotiation, or bracing for a bid. So, how can three holding companies that technically control less than half the market dictate the future of an entire continent's aviation? To understand why these three groups dominate European skies, you need to understand what they actually are, because most passengers have no idea. When someone books a flight on British Airways, they're buying a ticket from International Airlines Group. When they fly Vueling from Barcelona to Rome, that's also IAG. Aer Lingus from Dublin to New York, IAG. The budget carrier Level operating from Barcelona, still IAG. Lufthansa Group operates the same model across an even wider geography. Lufthansa itself serves Germany, Swiss covers Switzerland, Austrian Airlines handles Vienna, Brussels Airlines connects Belgium, Eurowings competes in the low-cost and leisure space, and as of January 2025, ITA Airways adds Italy as the group's fifth home market. Air France-KLM runs Air France from Paris Charles de Gaulle, KLM from Amsterdam Schiphol, Transavia as its budget arm, and Martinair for cargo. With SAS now entering the fold, Copenhagen becomes a third major hub for Air France-KLM. The holding company structure is the critical innovation here. Each brand maintains its own identity and its own national landing rights. A passenger flying Austrian Airlines from Vienna to Tokyo experiences an Austrian product. But behind the curtain, fleet purchasing, fuel hedging, maintenance contracts, and route planning are increasingly centralized. Combined, the groups carried 359.4 million passengers in 2025, more than the entire population of the United States, flowing through just three corporate entities every single year. The playbook has been remarkably consistent. Identify a weakened national carrier, acquire a minority stake, navigate regulatory approval, sometimes over multiple years, integrate operations behind the scenes while preserving the brand. Lufthansa perfected this first, Swiss in 2005, Brussels Airlines in 2008, Austrian Airlines in 2009. Each acquisition followed the same logic. These carriers served wealthy catchment areas, Zurich, Vienna, Brussels, but couldn't compete against low-cost rivals on short-haul or Gulf carriers on long-haul. Lufthansa absorbed them, fed their passengers into Frankfurt and Munich, and turned previous unprofitable flag carriers into feeder networks for its intercontinental operation. IAG took a different approach. British Airways and Iberia merged as equals in 2011, creating a holding company that combined BA's dominance on the North Atlantic, the single most profitable aviation corridor in the world, with Iberia's extensive Latin American network from Madrid. They added Vueling for short-haul in 2013, then Aer Lingus in 2015, which gave them a transatlantic stepping stone through Dublin. Air France-KLM pioneered the model in 2004, but moved more cautiously afterward. The group focused on deepening its dual-hub strategy between Paris and Amsterdam rather than acquiring additional carriers. That changed dramatically in recent years. The acquisition of ITA Airways represents perhaps the most politically complex airline deal in European history. ITA itself only launched in October 2021 as the successor to the perpetually bankrupt Alitalia, an airline that had consumed billions in Italian government subsidies over decades. Lufthansa signed the agreement in May 2023 for a 41% stake at a price of €325 million. The deal then spent over a year grinding through European Commission review. Brussels demanded significant competition remedies, requiring Lufthansa to release slots and open routes to rivals on key city pairs between Italy, Central Europe, and North America. The transaction finally closed on January 17, 2025. Under the agreement, Lufthansa holds options to acquire full 100% ownership of ITA Airways at a later date. What Lufthansa gains is substantial. ITA operates a modern fleet of 106 Airbus aircraft, including long-haul A350-900s and A330-900s. It carried 16.2 million passengers in 2025. Rome Fiumicino and Milan Linate became strategic hubs for the group. Italy becomes Lufthansa's fifth home market. The integration is already moving quickly. ITA's Valair loyalty members began earning and redeeming through miles and more in February 2025. The carrier withdrew from SkyTeam in 2025 and joined Star Alliance in April 2026. This single alliance switch immediately strengthens Star Alliance's Mediterranean presence while weakening SkyTeam's footprint in Southern Europe. While Lufthansa was navigating Italian politics, IAG faced its own acquisition drama and was forced to concede defeat. IAG had pursued Air Europa, Spain's second-largest full-service carrier, for years. The prize was Air Europa's Latin American routes from Madrid, which would have consolidated IAG's position as the dominant transatlantic operator from the Iberian Peninsula to Latin America. But in August 2024, after receiving the extensive list of remedies from the European Commission, IAG concluded the regulatory demands would destroy the deal's financial value. They walked away, paying a €50 million break fee. The Commission's demands were simply too much. But IAG pivoted with remarkable speed. Rather than acquiring, the group invested internally. In May 2025, IAG placed a landmark order for 71 wide-body aircraft from Airbus and Boeing, including 32 Boeing 787-10s and 21 Airbus A330neos, with options for more. The fleet renewal strategy underpins IAG's long-haul expansion without the regulatory burden of acquiring another airline. The result is striking. IAG posted €5 billion in operating profit for 2025, an operating margin of 15.1%, making it comfortably the most profitable of the three European groups. For comparison, Lufthansa Group managed €2 billion in operating profit at a 5.1% margin. Air France-KLM recorded a €2 billion operating result at a 6.1% margin. Air France's KLM move on SAS represents the group's most ambitious expansion in 2 decades. In August 2024, the group completed its purchase of a 19.9% stake in SAS as part of a consortium that helped the Scandinavian carrier exit its restructuring proceedings. Then, in July 2025, Air France-KLM announced formal proceedings to increase its stake to a controlling 60.5%. with the majority acquisition expected to close in the second half of 2026. The strategic logic is compelling. Both Paris-Charles de Gaulle and Amsterdam Schiphol are effectively full. Schiphol faces particularly severe constraints. The Dutch government sought to reduce annual flight movements at Amsterdam Schiphol to address noise concerns, a battle Air France-KLM fought bitterly. though in March 2026, the Netherlands' highest court annulled the cap, ruling it was legally inadequately justified. Copenhagen solves this problem. SAS dominates the wealthy Scandinavian market, a region where Air France-KLM has never been strong, as strong as SAS at least. The addition of Copenhagen as a third major hub provides growth capacity that the group simply cannot achieve at its existing airports. SAS's transition from Star Alliance to SkyTeam, completed on September 1, 2024, immediately expanded the alliance's reach. But here's where this entire story takes a big unexpected turn. The significance of these acquisitions isn't about adding passengers, and it isn't really about adding routes. It's about what the final remaining targets can do to the entire competitive balance of European aviation. With ITA absorbed by Lufthansa and SAS moving to Air France-KLM, there is essentially one major independent flag carrier remaining in Western Europe: TAP Air Portugal. TAP holds something no other European airline possesses. Lisbon sits as the closest major European hub to South America. TAP controls a massive share of the Europe to Brazil market. The carrier also maintains extensive connections to former Portuguese colonies across Africa and Asia. The Portuguese government relaunched the long-delayed privatization in July 2025, aiming to sell a 44.9% stake to a strategic airline partner, with a further 5% earmarked for TAP employees. No binding bids were due by April 2, 2026, and the chess match has officially clarified. Both Lufthansa and Air France-KLM submitted non-binding offers by the deadline. IAG, which had initially expressed interest, announced it would not proceed with the acquisition, saying it was prioritizing growth opportunities within the existing group. That leaves two. Under the privatization process, the stakeholding company, PaPublica, has 30 days to prepare a report on each proposal's merits. Binding bids are then expected within 90 days. The privatization will then have to be approved by the European Commission. The stakes couldn't be higher. If Air France-KLM wins, it secures a southern European hub, unconstrained by Schiphol's capacity pressures, and locks in the South Atlantic network it has long coveted. If Lufthansa prevails, it completes a sweep of southern Europe, adding Lisbon to Rome, and achieves the broadest continental coverage of any European group. This is still the real chess match, not airline versus airline, but two holding companies maneuvering for geographic coverage that cannot be replicated. These three groups are vying for strategic control of the European aviation market. Consider the paradox: Europe's top airline groups controlling 24.9% of departing intra-European flights, compared to the top four having a market share of 79.1% of the domestic departing capacity in the United States. By that metric, Europe remains competitive, but this statistic obscures a critical reality. On long-haul routes, where margins are highest, the concentration is dramatically more severe. On premium corporate routes, the North Atlantic, Latin America, Southern Africa, their share climbs higher still. The holding company structure makes this dominance nearly invisible to consumers. A passenger choosing between Lufthansa, Swiss, Austrian Airlines, and now ITA Airways believes they're comparing four independent competitors. They're not. They're choosing between four brands owned by the same parent, optimized to cover different price points and different geographies without cannibalizing each other. Meanwhile, Ryanair carried 206.5 million passengers in 2025, far more than any individual European legacy group. But Ryanair doesn't compete on long-haul. It doesn't control hub infrastructure. The low-cost carriers dominate volume. The holding companies control value. In 2004, when Air France and KLM merged, everyone assumed national pride would tear the structure apart within a decade. The Dutch demanded autonomy, the French demanded control, divorce seemed inevitable. 21 years later, Air France-KLM is not only intact, but expanding. It's absorbing SAS, a carrier that represents Scandinavian identity, as powerfully as KLM represents the Netherlands. This is what the market underestimated. The holding company model doesn't eliminate national identity, it monetizes it. Each brand retains its flag, its livery, its cultural positioning. ITA Airways will carry echoes of Alitalia's legacy and Italian design. SAS will still represent Scandinavian efficiency. But behind every branded departure gate, the same three financial engines make the decisions. Loyalty programs cross-pollinate. The passengers see brands. The industry sees balance sheets. When IAG placed that $21 billion wide-body order at list prices in May 2025, it wasn't British Airways buying planes. It was a holding company, leveraging the combined purchasing power of 5 airline brands to negotiate pricing that no individual carrier could achieve alone. When the TAP Air Portugal privatization concludes sometime in 2026, the last significant piece will have been placed. 2 groups, not 3, are now vying for it. Whoever wins will control the aviation infrastructure connecting Europe to South America, to Lusophone Africa, to a network that Lisbon alone can serve. A handful of corporate boards in London, Frankfurt, and Paris are determining which cities get long-haul connections, which routes justify investment, and which fares the market will bear. 3 balance sheets, limited alternatives, and proof that sometimes the most significant transformations in an industry don't require deregulation or disruption. Sometimes they require patience, holding company structures, and the willingness to bet that passengers will never notice who actually owns the plane. The question isn't whether 3 groups can control European aviation, it's whether the rest of the continent is really paying attention. Hey, before you go, the YouTube algorithm thinks you're going to like this video next, so why not check it out?